wakati pasile kama akana zvakanokwanisa unoona kana inda ichitwa newanedomo munoisa paruware motsika mokuya mosha kana nhunzi inoshayiwa chekudya.
Ene ndiri kuzviziva kuti vamunangagwa nyaya yavo ndeyekuti kana vachinge vakombwa zvavo zvinovawisira mumhirizhonga. Bandimirai muone, iwe wenyika une hasha, indiri wenyasha. Hakuna pauruzoenda, ini ndinokupedza ndiri pamabvi murunyararo, hausi kuzondigona.
Ndapasina kupindira kwaishe nechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti isu vamwe tioneswe moto. Ndapasina kupindira kwaishe nechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti isu vamwe tioneswe moto. Ndapasina kupindira kwaishe kana dzimba dzedu dzingadai dziri dzavo mawanzira vanoita dzimba dzavo vanoda kuti isu vamwe tigare mumiti dzimba 10 pamunhu umwe chete vanoda kuti isu vamwe tigare mumiti dzimba 10 pamunhu umwe chete vanoda kuti isu vamwe tigare mumiti. Dai pasina kupindira kwaishe nechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto.
This is the situation right now. Zimbabweans went through a by-election which many have seen as a precursor to the 2023 general election. Now on March 26th, the elections had incidences of violence as political parties tussled for power and for dominance ahead of the 2023 general elections, which some believe are going to be watershed. Now, we have to discuss power, politics, and violence in Zimbabwe, especially as we look at the younger generation who have not witnessed the liberation war struggles, the violence that was there for Zimbabwe to attain its freedom. Now, is Zimbabwe going to go through another violent phase, like what we saw in 2008 runoff elections, or the other bloody elections that we have seen? Are politicians willing to walk through past dead bodies to State House just to maintain power? Now, to help me discuss this emotive and somewhat controversial topic, I have with me in the House the Deputy Spokesperson of the CCC, Ostalos Siziwa. Thank you very much for joining us, Ostalos.
Thank you, my brother.
I'm also joined here in studio by the man who's studying for a doctorate, Richard Mahomba, the Director of Administration in the ZANU-PF political party. Thank you very much, Mahomba, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And congratulations for your appointment as Director.
Well, it's another opportunity to serve the continent and the country in pure ideological terms.
Amazing. This is the situation right now in proud partnership with Contract from Mashingo, and we are discussing the issues that matter. Now I'm going to invite Mahomba. I'll start with you. Now let us talk. I know I'm talking to academics here and also political opponents who respectfully agree and disagree, and I'm hoping that that discussion is going to be held in that manner. But coming to you, what is your perception, Richard, with the violence that we as Zimbabweans have seen during elections, and the appetite to hold political power, how do we balance that in Zimbabwean context?
The historical reality that Zimbabwe has been confronted with has been that of very excessive allegations towards ZANU-PF's affinity for violence, and in the past with very justified examples of ZANU-PF's involvement in violence. But that type of thinking has been selective in the sense that we have ignored the reality of inter-party violence, and that violence is a cross-cutting political culture that is defining to our politics. And you'd also notice that one set precedence of violence was that of 1 August, and how within the context of 1 August we hear a narrative that only incriminates ZANU-PF and ignores the reality of the fact that ZANU-PF's action was actually a response to what was perceived as a security threat then. But looking at also the context of our violence in quantitative terms, you'll notice that in the past you had hundreds, yet thousands of people that would be victims of inter-political party violence. And when you go to 1 August 2018, you find out that the violence that erupted was as a result of inter-party instabilities and all of that. But now coming to the current context of the by-elections, he had Kwekwe, where about 7 people were suspected to be members of ZANU-PF going into a crowd that was predominantly CCC, and these were thousands. So when you try and evaluate the logic of about 7 to 10 people causing violence, where there are multitudes, where there's over 1,000, you also begin to have suspicions that the narrative of violence also may stand to be choreographed or stage managed. So you've got all those realities. And also there's a feeling that, there's some sense of dramatic posturing also around the issue of violence. For instance, the Madzibabawe Shanduko, issue. And so there are these varying contradictions around the reality of our violence. But ultimately, I think we should move towards a violent-free political landscape.
Now, I'll come to you, Ostalis. And before you actually allow us to have a response to the issues, what is your opening submission in terms of politics, power, and violence in this country? Where are we going? Where are we coming from?
Thank you very much, Pule, and I'll respond with empirical evidence. This country, as first and foremost, has never known a decade uninterrupted of stability. Beginning in 1980, there are a series of violence, kukurahunde, politically motivated violence, with one sole intention, and this is a pattern, of power retention and accumulation of the same. And at the center of the violence that happened in Matebeleland was the agenda to create a de facto one-party state. We move to a period of 2000, 2002, violence, 2005, violence, 2008, extreme violence, a lot of dead bodies on account of politics, 2018, 2016, in fact, 2018, recently 2022. So what we see is a state that uses and unleashes violence when it is threatened by a possible democratic breakthrough. So there is a correlation proven scientifically by empirical evidence that ZANU-PF is a violent political organization. That ZANU, when it is threatened at the level of superior logic, popularity, and electoral defeat, it unleashes violence. And I would use the quotation by Mr. Mnangagwa. He says when Mugabe accepted defeat. I personally managed to ensure that we correct that. And how did they correct that? It was the unleashing of the military at the command of the political elite in ZANU, when we had what was recorded in history as the long sleeve, half sleeves, and thousands of people died in that runoff. I mean, were displaced and were injured. So what we saw in Kwekwe is where political contestation, a political movement that had suffered banning, suffered unleashing of all, laws against its existence in terms of freedom of speech and gathering. The only solution unleashed by the political elite, the Kwekwe violence, was instigated, championed, and directed by the then Minister of State Security, Muda, and Al-Shabaab, which is a paramilitary wing controlled by a ZANU-PF Politburo member and a minister in government. And that was unleashed at the background of a possible threat to its electoral defeat in Kwekwe Central. And how Zimbabweans have reacted to this violence was punish ZANU-PF by losing that seat, proving for me, beyond any scientific doubt, that violence is not a solution, that violence does not work. But now ZANU has not used violence against its perceived opponents, but also it has been a tool internally. You hear a minister and a spokesperson, then Mutswango of ZANU-PF, clamoring about their military coup. And you know what happened to the house of their then minister, Jonathan Moore. Live bullets fired on the basis of a possible threat to its hegemon. So you see that the use of violence is a method. It doesn't happen without a method. It happens at a certain historic epoch when the sender is failing to hold, when it has been defeated internally in its processes by what was known as G40. ZANU unleashed its only last tool in the show, violence. When it was threatened in this by-election by the emergence of the Yellow Baby, by massive political turnout and rejection of its puppet political organization in the name of MDCT and its various forms and facets, the only tool that was unleashed by ZANU is terror. And you can see, and I'm happy that my brother is an intellectual, the submissions, any pronunciation by head of state and government is a policy position. So when they say in their political programs, Kombai Murove, is philosophizing, is communicating a policy position from the center, that all ZANU-PF structured are thereby marshaled, commandeered, and instructed by the head of state and government that any possible dissent, because a demonstration that was responding to is codified in the constitution of this country, is a guaranteed right to demonstrate and petition. But the solution given by head of state, unfortunately so, is that Kombai Murov. So the abuse now, that's why you see, as I conclude, the conflation of the securocrats, the conflation of the police with ZANU-PF. If you went to the violence that happened when our president went to Mashingo, was that the first roadblock is manned by police officers. You are allowed to pass. You are unleashed into a very violent, brutal second roadblock manned by ZANU-PF thugs. You see, so the abuse of state institutions to make sure that violence is used with a specific model and method that we see by ZANU-PF, but only if power is threatened, which for me is a worrying cause, because 2023 presents a possible democratic breakthrough, and you have seen that when it's threatened, the only thing that they will unleash is the military, or in particular is violence towards the people.
Mahomba raises a critical issue of intra-party violence, and that has been reported massively within the old part of the politics that you were part of the MDC alliance. And recently a few incidences internally also with the CCC. Now, you talk of ZANU-PF as inherently violent. Aren't you, as a political organization, also violent, seeing the internal violence that comes with you?
There is no, unless I've not witnessed, there is no witness in the public and private spaces. We've had contradictions. when there are differences in the alternative. The dominant philosophy that governs the Citizens Coalition is let's defeat each other at the level of superiority. I've differed personally as a leader of the Citizens Coalition with other champions. I've differed with other members of the alternative. I've even differed with some of the grassroots compatriots. Our people themselves have differed, whether it's about the best person to lead us, whether it's about the best policy. We have even differed with some of our people in the Citizens Coalition about the ideological thrust that must drive the Citizens Coalition. But we make sure that we defeat each other at the level of superiority. If it was not for that, you would not have seen us in the Citizens Coalition, because we have robust ideas that differ with the political elite in our organization, but we have been allowed free speech because it is protected for by the Citizens Coalition. We have had our people differing. I have differed with other people in strategic intervention with the national question, but it's allowed. And those with superior ideas have managed to surface above. Yes, people can exchange words, but one thing that we can't allow in terms of our culture, we are conscious again of the previous political formations, which some of us were part and parcel of, which had their own problems. But the new political movement, as led by African Nation Chamis, has no tolerance to violence. Let the people with superior ideas thrive. If you think you can differ with me, differ. I differ with my compatriots in ZANU-PF. I differ with my compatriots in other political organizations. But we meet in the marketplace of ideas. We differ. The ones with best ideas must be able to thrive, and the best ideas must be able to flourish.
Now I want to come to you. You said that there's been unfair, accusation against ZANU-PF, and also at some point, over exaggeration.
Yeah.
Just to paint ZANU-PF in the bad picture. Now, why do you think it is so?
Why do I think it is so? I'll come back to that question, but I would want to respond to a few pertinent issues that my compatriot has raised from the other side. He speaks of decades of violence, and in his arguments he omits the decades of polarization that have been punctuating that violence. He omits the external interference that has also framed the political discourse of the so-called decades of violence. And I'll explain what I mean by that. There is this fixation and this propensity to quickly point out to Gukraundi as the major site of violence that has affected our people at the behest of ZANU-PF's appetite for power. But what we then forget is that there was a significant role of external interference at the time. And this external interference was mainly predicated on the British and Russian hegemony interests, such that we found ourselves caught up in the Cold War politics. And that was a perpetuation of the reality of neocolonialism. And another extension of neocolonialism is seen manifesting itself through the birth of an opposition political party that was offended by the land reform program. And the patriotic conviction of our people at the time, the patriotic conviction of the war veteran and the ordinary land-hungry person was that of resorting to aggressive means of reclaiming the land. And that was seen through the consolidation of the vote. Talk about the vote in 2002. So the reality of violence must not only be seen within the context of power appetite, but it must be seen within the context of consolidating, enduring liberation values. The land reform program, I know most people, NGOs and political parties that are proxies to Anglo-American interests would look at that as a violent process and then speak of the decade of violence in 2000. But we forget that the reality of creating economic transformation had failed through legislative means. And the people had to take radical positions, as also enunciated by Fanon, who says that when you need to give rebirth to structural marginalization, to structural violence, you need to deploy violence. So, When we look at the context of violence in Zimbabwe, we need to go beyond the narrow analysis of ZANU-PF and MDC, but we need to look at the issues of structural violence in terms of liberating the economy, in terms of having a political party that is guided by enduring values, not a political party that invites sanctions for the structured immiseration of its people, not for a political party that invites sanctions so that there could be no international transactions. You would know that the reality of OFAC has suppressed global transactional interests of Zimbabwe. And in that context, you'd expect a hypocritical diplomacy to manifest. No. So in other words, I'm saying when you look at this violence that neo-colonialism is generating, where we physically fight, it's making us ignore the metaphysics of the violence that is being inflicted on our economy, the violence that is being inflicted on our social delivery system, because we inherited a colonial state. And within our failure to complement the residues of colonialism, then a neo-colonial narrative comes to say a government has failed. And against that backdrop, that government needs to be changed. So we are fighting at a metaphysical level, and we need to look at things from that metaphysical level beyond the narrow arguments of, 7 people were arrested at a rally, and no, this shows that there is a decade of violence. And if we were to quantitatively speak and measure the violence aggregate of 2000 and the violence aggregate of 2022, do you not see an improvement? It is philosophically negligent for anyone to expect an overnight transformation of the political situation to say, let's quantitatively speak, how many people faced violence in 2002? How many people faced violence even in the Kukraund? Let's say fine, ZANU-PF is totally to blame, and one would throw the artificial figure of 20,000, and we say fine, we go to 2000, the land reform. How many white people were affected by the land reform? Less than 4,000. But then that becomes the justification for sanctions. If the issue of sanctions was about the violation of human rights, the white men should have been angry about the numbers that we observed during Kukraund. Why didn't the numbers that we saw occurring within Kukraund not creating a premise for justifying sanctions? It is because, according to colonial interests, black blood does not matter. The only other time the white men started talking about the significance of human rights and property rights was when a few, just a paltry, of the colonial remnants were affected by the land reform. So the issue of violence is more metaphysical than we want to look at it in literal terms, but inter-party terms.
Let's agree that, as you say, the black man's blood does not matter to the white.
According to the neo-colonial agenda that is pursuing the narrative of human rights, yes, the black blood does not matter.
But does the black blood matter to the black man who's leading this country? And if it does, why do they resort to it?
It does. This is why you should notice that we now have the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission that was instituted by the Second Republic to say we need to take an audit of the blood that has been shed in this country. And in any case, if we are also going to be genuine about lasting peace in this country, we should not start discussing the issue of political violence from Kukraund. There are atrocities that were committed by Rhodesians, and today these Rhodesians still survive under the pretext of political impunity, which we called reconciliation. So if we were to discuss issues of true reconciliation, we need to arrest the remnants of the Rhodesians that killed our people. Because if we are to speak quantitatively as well, the bloodshed of the first and the second Chimrenga exceeds the little numbers that we are told by human rights activists, which are said to have occurred during Kukraund and just recently in the by-elections. So if we are to discuss violence, we need not to be selective. We need to look at every aspect of the architecture of violence and how it has destabilized our current political landscape and how it has invented a culture of perpetual violence, even at an inter-party level, not within ZANU-PF only.
I'll give you an opportunity to have a direct response.
Yeah, thank you very much. I need to assist my brother because at least he accepts the issue of reading. And I want to remind him, because we, as intellectuals, we can't be ahistoric. As intellectuals, we cannot, in front of cameras and in front of the whole world, condone intellectual laziness for the purposes of achieving a sectorial minority political agenda. My brother here, who studied at the university in Migrants, knows very well that he would do well speaking on behalf of the Mugabe regime than on behalf of the present so-called new dispensation. Because when he talks about the neo-colonial agenda, when he talks about the West that he refers to, he does not understand that these people plays in the present moment a central role in government policy programming at the present moment. He talks about the violent land reform, that it was not for and against the West and the white men. Precisely so. The matter of fact is the following. Number one, the pro-democracy movement is the one that went to the veterans and gave and reminded all veterans in their political conscience that the willing buyer, willing seller program is not sufficient to address the landed question in this country. Mugabe then comes in and hijacks it for political objectives and it turns violence. So we want to talk about facts. The war vet, after receiving political consciousness from the pro-democracy movement, actually had a demonstration in front of State House and said, Mugabe, we throned you, we can dethrone you. Who gave them political consciousness? Who reminded them on the agenda of the Liberation Project? In the current setup, he talks about white people. He talks about the land question. ZANU in the present system under Mtuli Ngube is saying, let's go back to the Lancaster resolution on land. It's saying, let's compensate white farmers. It's actually saying, let's give back land to white people. They're not just saying they're doing it in Manicaland. They're doing it in Chires. They're doing it in Mashonaland West. What ZANU in the current present system has done, it lacks the ideological compass which my brother wants to talk about. ZANU has no fidelity whatsoever to the liberation struggle. He has no fidelity whatsoever to the democratic project in this country. Why? At the center of the liberation struggle, and my brother knows it, was the sacrosanctity of the vote, was land and the economy. These two have been abandoned. Who is getting land in this country is the white man. Where are they from? They are from the West. Who is getting a tax breaks in this country is the white man. Where are they from? They are from the West. Who are these companies? Great Dyke. Who are these companies? Where? So my brother now doesn't know that while this is pushing a liberation narrative in front of cameras, ZANU and Mtuli Ngube, in the background, the RPZ has been used as a platform to facilitate neo-colonial and neoliberal agenda in the present system. What is Mtuli Ngube's economic policy? Austerity for posterity. What is that? We're going back to ISAP. What is Mtuli Ngube's economic program right now? A private sector-led economy, informed by what? Bretton Woods institutions. What is ZANU-PF saying? We're going to knock at the doors of the IMF and the World Bank. Where are they? They are in the West. What do they represent ideologically? They represent a neoliberal agenda, austerity for posterity. ZANU in the present moment is actually saying we're going to knock. That's what ZANU is saying. We're going to knock to the Bretton Woods institution. So my brother here has a discongestion with what ZANU is doing. He's doing a good PR management program to say one thing, but it's not what we are seeing at the present moment. Who is at the center of 7 heights of corruption in this country? Is the white men. Who are those people? Should we name them and where they come from? They are all predominantly from the West. What is the open for business narrative all about? Let's open for the greatest bidder. This country, my brother, is being, and Zimbabweans should know this. This country is being sold to the greatest bidder, majority of them predominantly white people. Who are the black people that have benefited? He himself, my brother, knows this. Who have benefited from the land program in this country? Black people don't have land. Black people are being exposed. The government is actually protecting white monopoly capital in the present system. ZANU, as I conclude, is pursuing right-wing extremist policies in this country. They have long, in fact, the gang, to be precise, The gang that is running ZANU-PF right now has no fidelity to the liberation project. The gang that is running ZANU-PF right now has no political conscience, has no ideological trust. Because ZANU under Mugabe, and allow me to acknowledge this, had a certain semblance of an ideological clarity. You knew their position in the African continent. You would hear Mugabe articulating the agenda of a black man as informed by his friends Fanon in the United Nations. You can't hear that from the current gang running this country. You can't hear what is their ideological compass. Friends Fanon said this, and he conscious our own generation about the kind of people running our country. He said, and this was actually philosophized more by Thomas Sankara. He said a soldier without ideological orientation is a potential criminal. So what we see is that ZANU has abandoned the question of an ideology. In fact, if we are going to do a survey, you are an investigative journalist, you can do this. Go and start their members of parliament. Majority of these people have no ideological trust of ZANU-PF itself, as was founded by liberation fighters like Ebejitepo. They are actually taking extractive, parasitic young people in different parts who are involved in illegal mining and all these other shenanigans and deploying them into parliament. Why bother trinket and trappings? If you look at the guy they deployed in Mavuku there, you see, at the center of his submissions was patronage. I'll give you this, I'll give you that, reducing young people into this fictitious belief that you can make it in this economy. Far from it, the economy has failed to provide jobs. The economy has failed to provide for the poor. The economy has failed to provide health care for the majority of young people and ordinary people in this country.
But as you speak here, you speak about issues around ideology and idea. But where does then the violence come from when it's about ideology? It's about lacking ideology. It is about going back to the West, as you say. How then does
precisely the point. Thank you for that question. The lack of ideological clarity means there are no values, means there is no conscience, means there is no feeling that we are humans, that we can differ politically and still not kill each other. So the lack of that, because that is the oxygen that must drive politics, contestation at the level of ideas. So the suppression of this, the relegation of an ideology in the political discourse has made criminal behavior and conduct to be the center of our politics. That's why they're able to unleash violence against Mazibaba. They say in their own narratives and bogus intelligence reports that Mazibaba is carrying some port that has got the powers for President Chamisa to attract numbers. So they unleash terror on an innocent comic civilian who's using his expression to appeal to the conscience of ordinary people in this country. So this is the level of a crisis that we are in. We've entered the zone of uncertainty thanks to ideological deficiency in the current political establishment as led by ZANU-PF and Emerson Mnangagwa in particular.
I'll give you an opportunity for direct response before I ask you a question.
I think the very simple and very basic response is that Gift is still nostalgic in his analysis of the present political happenings. And why am I saying that? When the new dispensation came to life, it was excessively committed to engaging everyone because it was born out of a nuance of reconciling. And this is why, out of the humility of his wisdom, His Excellency the President, Comrade Emerson Mnangagwa, yet to extend the olive branch and say, let us engage and re-engage. Regardless of how much we have disregarded our humanity and our right to exist through the sanctions that we have imposed. That was humility in a leader. A person that was focused on creating a progressive path for a departure from excessive speeches that only culminated in too much food for thought and less food for stomach. Yes, whilst I have got this abundant reverence to the former president, Comrade Robert Mugabe, his position ended up having this excessive point of redundancy as far as rhetoric was concerned. But there was his protege, President Emerson Mnangagwa, putting across the narrative of production and productivity to say, in as much as we have maintained a radical leftist point of view, we need to meet at the center. And he has meticulously done that. The Transitional Stabilization Program, it speaks to that particular agenda. But fast forward, having noticed that the excessive affinity to engage the former colonizer and making them a friend, that it was not producing fruit, that the same colonizer, after putting across these very good initiatives, the former colonizer will go and hobnob with their traditional imperialist opposition party. They would fake adoption so that the narrative of violence in Zimbabwe is amplified more than the roads that we are building, more than the resuscitation of the health sector that we are doing, more than also even the development of the electricity supply and many other development aspects that we've witnessed, so that it's overshadowed by the narrative of abductions and all. So there was need to then say, but what are the dividends of wanting to engage this unrepentant colonial stakeholder in the matrix of our scheme of things? Because this colonial stakeholder would fund reputationless characters like one Hopewell Chingono to misrepresent the image of Zimbabwe, especially at his recent Geneva speech where he was only talking about the administrative inadequacies of the state and forgetting to mention some very phenomenal milestones. So when we look at violence, we speak about violence within that discursive frame and not within these minor perspectives. So I strongly feel that in terms of reconciling the state to its normalcy, we have seen that even the finance minister spoke about, the surplus in the economy and all those important strategic, economic development aspects. But most profoundly, the president has given us a very clear mantra where he has actually indicated that me and you are responsible for building the hopes that we want for our country through the position. It's clear that the Zimbabwean has got that direct mandate to build their country. So what does it mean? It means that the development agenda is not solely attached to ZANU-PF, but we should ask ourselves how much we are contributing to our taxes, how much we are fulfilling the obligation of our social contract to serve the state in as much as we expect the state to serve us. How is our patriotism translating to staying at work for over the stipulated working hours? How is our patriotism translating to people volunteering themselves to offer medical services to communities? Our doctors, are they doing that? No. So we need to have this propensity, this pedigree to patriotism at a more personal level to say, what does the president mean when he says, we ask ourselves, some of us have got legal earnings, how much are we contributing from our legal earnings to at least pay fees for disadvantaged youths before we look for a colonial donor to come and do that for us? We have got local business people are failing to even drill boreholes in our rural areas simply because there is no absolute and pragmatic understanding of the enunciation of what Nika Inuwa means. So we need to move away from that mindset that says our solutions can be drawn from the details of the IMF and all of that, because the president's position is clear. And he also spoke about violence, that the center is at the center of proliferating violence. But if I recall, when I was listening to one of the speeches by Vice President Chiwenga in the rally that he addressed, in his, of course, preliminary remarks to the president's keynote speech, he actually made indications that even if you are found on the wrong side instigating violence, as a member of ZANU-PF would ensure that the law catches up with you. So if in a rally where political euphoria resides, there are such annunciations, then someone alleges that the center is proliferating violence. I wonder which world do they live in, where they have no interface with current affairs to that extent.
I want to interrogate the statements that you have made. I'll start with the last one where you said the vice president in his speech before the president spoke. In Kwekwe, the day before when Nani was killed, the vice president said we will crash like flies, to the extent that even flies will not.
Well, that is a political.
And the following day, someone died.
Well, that is a political
that is the center.
And if you want to think that an entire vice president, when he throws hyperboles and metaphors, you want to throw that as a policy position. Yet an absolute policy position is that of peace and reconciliation as instituted by the NPRC. That was mere political posturing. You find that political excitement all across the board.
But
in the MDC, there is another very classical, regrettable lie of someone that was of their president in the CCC who was claiming that they met Trump and all of that. There is that euphoria that politicians tend to have amongst the crowd. So that is political posturing that cannot be translated to a policy position.
Then going to the president, he also then said in Chitungwiza that nyika inovakwa nevayo, but you have to come through ZANU-PF because ndove nevenyika, vekusisi havasi venevenyika, kauya neikoko hakuna chinofamba. Now you in your statement seem to say that the nyika inovakwa nevene mantra includes everyone regardless of political affiliation. When your president and my president as president of state says this emphatically clear through loud microphones.
I'll give you an example and say, would you be sane enough to want to entrust your obligation to the country through a political party that has failed to provide clean water in cities, because the MDC is a majority there? How would you want to entrust your confidence in achieving national aspirations through a political party that is running local authorities and fails to pick beans on a weekly basis? So in other words, what President Emerson Mnangagwa was merely saying was that ZANU-PF is a part of deliverables. You have seen the roads and you can bank your confidence on us, unlike these other people who fail to repair your street lights. You can bank on us because we have managed to fight COVID and made Zimbabwe to have a lesser HIV risk, a lesser TB risk, because we've managed to contain that, other than voting for a party that fails to take care of sewer systems. The dilapidation of our cities is a microcosm of the broader prospective failure of the opposition. If you are failing to run councils, then we can't entrust you with bigger issues. And therefore, those that have got, that sincere patriotic instinct to develop Zimbabwe are better off aligning to this phenomenal development partner that is called ZANU-PF. So ZANU-PF is no longer just a political part of slogans and regalia and all of that. It is a development partner within the broader national question of development.
You are incompetent. You failed to do basics, and Zimbabweans cannot trust you.
Thank you. The good thing is that we are talking to someone who speaks for a party that has been in government for 42 years with absolute power, executive, legislative, and in the judiciary. Under ZANU-PF, he talks about SUA. Under ZANU, 97% of Zimbabwean people don't have jobs. Under ZANU-PF, we drive just out of this studio. There are potholes. We are now the pothole capital of Africa, thanks to ZANU-PF's failure to run this country. Under ZANU, Zimbabwe has been reduced into a basket case. He affirms it. ZANU wants to relegate its authority to the private sector and non-governmental organization. The reason why they are saying Zimbabweans, you must help us. You must build, you must find your own job. It is the state's constitutional responsibility to provide health to ordinary people. The hope Ochingono is thrashing here is provide beyond any scientific doubt that there are no cancer machines. What they will do is what they've been doing for 42 years, norm dropping. How do you call me a puppet of the West? I grew up next to him. We went to the same high school. We debate the same intellectual discourse. We deserve a better life together. He knows my history. I've never been to Washington, D.C. He calls me a puppet of the West. He knows I understand the agenda of the liberation struggle better than the political elite in ZANU. He calls me a puppet. What has ZANU done to all of us? They've reduced us to paupers. Young people are waking up at the blessing of an empty stomach and a jobless existence. You search part of your Indians here, they can't afford decent life. They can't afford these young people. This is the legacy of ZANU-PF. The Auditor General's report, and I want to be empirical. The Auditor General's report says the executive authority in this country has failed to create strong institutions where ministers, just recently more than 200 million disappears unaccounted for from the Ministry of Health. Right? The Auditor General's report revealing shocking revelations of corruption at the center. In fact, one of the recent revelations is that the anti-corruption part of the institutions that they've created are not sufficient to deal with all that corruption in this country. The RPZ has been used to promote and push quasi-fiscal activities outside parliamentary approval. These people in ZANU have been borrowing on our behalf. They want us to pay more tax. We're one of the most overtaxed countries, not just in Africa, but in the entire continent. The 2% tax by Mtuli Ngube, go and start. It's only that my brother has no appreciation of economics. We are one of the most overtaxed country, people in this country. How much more do they want from ordinary people? You've already overtaxed them. But after that, you don't account to them. What is that man going? They extract diamond. Look at the money that we lose out of illicit financial flows. More than 2 billion a year. Look at the auction system that they are presiding over. It can only provide 24% of the demand. But how much are the taxpayers paying to that auction system? More than 2 billion a year. Right? Why can't you abandon the Zimbabwean dollar? It was caught in flagrant delicto. It was caught pens down. People don't trust the Zimbabwean dollar. But more important, the people of Zimbabwe don't trust the person as the head of state and government. They have not only confirmed this through their emphatic rejection in by-election, but they've confirmed this through research that have been done by independent observers. For example, Mpoi has proven that 64% of Zimbabweans believe that the head of state and government does not answer to them. So Zimbabwe suffers from a broken down social contract. You cannot come here, Mahomba, and request the people of Zimbabwe to contribute more from what they've already been doing. The diaspora, they've rejected the diaspora to vote. They've rejected the diaspora to come home and enjoy. But how much are they providing to the economy? Majority of the money that we have that has sustained this economy is coming from diaspora remittances. But they have rejected them the only right, which is to right to vote. The contradictions in the present system, the lack of political sight, the lack of political conscience, ideological deficiencies, ideological contradictions under the present system. So that's what we see, my brother, in the present system. ZANU has failed absolutely. It can't be compared by any regime to any regime in Southern Africa. It has failed completely to provide jobs. It has failed to construct roads. You hear them in front of cameras at this present moment crying and celebrating the loudest. They want people to go and tell the world that we have built Masvingo Road. We have Smith left that road. What we have done, that road was destroyed, more potholes. What we have done is to refurbish the road, nothing else. Talk about dual roads. They've not done that. Are they not collecting money from taxpayers? They are doing so. Where is the money going? You saw Henry Rushwa was captured in airport by their own state security agents, caught in flagrant delicto with gold. Where is Henry Rushwa? She's having banquets and celebrating white parties across. In fact, in the present ZANU-PF government, they celebrate not just mediocrity. They celebrate criminality. The clowns that they parrot all over the internet are people with criminal records, are people who are involved in extraction, are people without any ideological compass, are people who are paupers, but because they became agents and joined the distribution value chain of criminal activities that is happening at the economic agenda of ZANU. They are being celebrated. These are people that were said as young person, they must be our inspirators. Definitely not. Our inspiration is Thomas Sankara. Our inspiration is Samora Machel. Our inspiration is Martin Luther King. We cannot be inspired as a generation, as young people, by clowns who are benefiting from extraction of our own land, from extraction from our own economy. But every day you are being parodied in national broadcasting television. Such discourses of depth and ideological clarity can be seen in the state broadcasting.
Some of these words that you use, clowns, not the center of what actually then inspires and makes sure that people are violent with each other.
No, but my brother, what do you call? We can go to a dictionary for the benefit of everyone. Can we go and define, okay, those guys who will be wearing Gucci, some labels, I don't know them, from stolen wealth, without any idea what is the Pashun Java's identity? As I conclude, what is Pashun Java's identity? What is his identity? Because he says to us, the reason why I mentioned him, because he wants to contest with that political. He says young people must vote for Emerson Mnangagwa, right? He's providing a solution political. My question is, in the political market in this country, what is his identity? What does he represent besides being comic? Besides telling people lies? There are no jobs, my brother. I don't need to be in the opposition to tell you this. I've actually abandoned the Triple C jacket and put on my intellectual jacket to give you empirical data that young people are unemployed. There are no drugs in this country. Corruption is in the highest. There are illicit financial flows in this country. Incoherent policies. ZANU suffers from ideological kwashoka. ZANU has been hijacked by a criminal gang without any correct connection with the Liberation Project. ZANU is run right now, actually has pushed Zimbabwe into an era of uncertainty because of all these economic and political contradictions, thanks to the gangs that they've been invited to descend.
I wish at some point, after this catalogue of problems that my good brother has presented, I wish at some point him and his other officeless gang members would at some point tell us the immediate solutions they have to corruption and all of that. But needless to say that, I also want to problematize how my good comrade tends to incriminate wealth when it is black. There is nothing wrong with black people acquiring wealth. And because you think they have got wealth and they are associated with a particular political party, then that qualifies them as clowns. It only exhibits a very huge thought caricature of one who thinks that good things only belong to white people and that black people do not deserve to have good things. And he also spoke about elections, that ZANU-PF was humiliated in the elections, and forgot to mention that statistically speaking, the voter aggregate for ZANU-PF out of these by-elections, even in urban areas, has been that of 37% increase. So, given that reality, that ZANU-PF is beginning to assume a 37% political influence in terms of the voting capacity and all, it means that in the 2023 elections, ZANU-PF is going to win. And what does that mean? It means that ideally, ZANU-PF, in terms of its policy deliverables, it is a darling of the masses. It means that in as much as, there could be elements like Opol Chinono who go out there and speak at Geneva, and you have got these viral messages being seen on social media, creating this immediate metropolitan or urban discourse of ZANU-PF's unpopularity. ZANU-PF is building Masuko Road. ZANU-PF is organically speaking to its structures through the Fumvudza program. So it's nice, it's flowery to raise these issues of administrative inadequacy in these very elite platforms. But we need to say, are you raising these things at the level of the cell? Do we even have the capacity? The answer is no. So ZANU-PF will win on the pretext of its organic interaction with the people. So the issue of violence really would not apply. And if you remember, in my initial sentiment, I had to give you an aggregate perspective of how there's been a decline in the monopoly of violence in our political landscape. And you're seeing that violence is slowly going down, down, down. What is beginning to matter more is the infrastructural change that we're giving to our people. It is the fiscal consolidation that we are giving to our people. Yes, you can talk of the currency, the slight currency instability, but take note, before the current change in terms of our ratings, the currency has been stable for months. Something that you could not witness even at a time when we're excessively depending on the US dollar. So those are the things that are going to cause ZANU-PF to win. Not this rhetoric on Twitter that does not speak to the interests of a person in Budzi. No, if you don't have structures there, you will not win, and no violence will be deployed there. So instead, our colleagues from the other side should take pragmatic notes from ZANU-PF on how they can rectify the sewer problems that their urban constituency that has rejected them by 36.7% is complaining about. So in as much as he may want to postures to speak about figures and all of that, he forgets the reality of the 37% rise of ZANU-PF's popularity. And the employee survey, who's employee in Chirumans? What is employee in case? What is employee in Binga, where the president just yesterday was giving rigs to the communities that is sustained by that?
Amazing discussion that we've been having here in partnership with Kotrat from Mashingo. Now, amazing insights that we have just been sharing here on the situation right now. But I'm just going to. We have run out of time, so we are going to bring this to a close. But this is what we need for Zimbabwe: a space where ideology is the issue. Superior arguments win the day instead of exchanging of hands or any other obstacles just to be the one above or to gain political power. Those are things of Stone Age. Even the dogs that used to bite each other on the streets for superiority, we don't see them anymore. Why humans? And I'll allow you to have your to conclude and also go to Ostalos. But what I want in conclusion is for us, because we are young people here sitting here, to say, what is the way forward for our nation? How do we bring a better, more informed young person who's prepared to argue, not through the use of violence or exchange of, because violence is not only in terms of the use of or obstacles to beat each other up or guns or weapons, but also sometimes verbal. It could be very violent and could actually, we have seen, has caused other people to commit suicide after such cyberbullying and stuff like that. How do we as Zimbabweans change our destiny?
I think the starting point, as already set out by my principal, His Excellency the President, Comrade Emerson Mnangagwa, through engagement and re-engagement. I think the starting point, or the greater theme that comes out of that, is a clear clarion call that our diversities should be the energy upon which we extract the values of our development agenda. Let's differ in the methodology, but find the common ground that produces food, that causes our hospitals to have medicine, that causes our people to have access to clean water, that causes all of us to have a livelihood that is decent to the essence of what being human should entail in any progressive society.
Amazing. I'll come to you to your closing.
Thank you very much. I wish will get an opportunity in the future to help our economic agenda in alternative program. To done this before, our record speaks for itself. We helped them during the government of national unity to transform the lives of ordinary people. The intention of our political movement is to transform the lives of ordinary people, including those that are in ZANU-PF. We want to provide for those predominantly that differ with us, not just with economic packages and survival, but also in terms of social safety net, but also in terms of their freedom, so that they're able to have these debates in national platforms. We want to provide them with the free speech. We want, when they retire from government, even people like Mahomba, we want to provide them with platforms to serve their government on the basis of their merit, not patronage. This is the society that we want to create, a society that is tolerant of political views, a society that replaces pursuit of positions and power with proposition to transform the lives of ordinary people. The Citizens Coalition for Change, as led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa, intends to change the complete political culture that is dominant in our politics in this country, with the intention to make sure that we provide for ordinary people, because the ordinary citizen has been relegated out of the politics in this country. That's why they suffer. That's why they are called to ululate. That's why they're called to watch from afar, as what they call black people enjoying wealth. There are people with wealth in this country whom we celebrate, black people in particular, and there are people who have stolen wealth from our people. We condemn them regardless of race, tribe, ethnicity, and religious belonging. Let's create a democratic developmental state anchored on a socially just economy. I thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this enlightening debate and very, very engaging that we've had. I also want to thank Frank Fanon, who was part of this discussion this evening. But the Zimbabwe that we want is not a Zimbabwe where we use accessories of pain to educate each other. We must use free flow of information. We must all desire to ensure that we enjoy the fruits of this country, regardless of our political, racial, or ethnic background. This is our country. We all belong. And the better the country is for everyone, the better the future of the country is for everyone. Now, this is me, your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, having been here on the situation right now in proud partnership with Kotrat and these young, fine gentlemen who were exchanging ideologies. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing Franz Fanon to our viewers, and thank you very much for having the most amazing debate and civil debate. Thank you. The young people are indeed the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, boss.
Yeah. Sorry for the delay.